Chapter 9. If Talon had not been so enthusiastic about her newfound ability to walk for long distances, and not a bit tired, she might have heard the crackle of twigs behind her. As it was, she had no idea she was not alone, until something grabbed her from behind and pulled a rough sack over her head. She cried out once, but her captor gagged her. Her hands bound as well, but her feet were left free. She kicked out and heard a low grunt. Her captor yanked the rope, tying her hands, making her stumble forward. "No more of that," said a harsh voice. "You're coming with me, girl." The owner of the voice yanked the rope again, and Talon had no choice but to follow blindly, her heart thudding madly. Who was her captor? What did he want with her? She knew it was male from the low voice, but more than that she couldn't say. They walked a long while. The grass began to thin, and gave way to moss as they traveled deeper into the forest. She couldn't tell what direction they traveled, except that the terrain wasn't so harsh as the way she and Smil had come. Talon wondered if the rope was cutting into her wrists at all. Perhaps Smil would feel the pain and come to her rescue. "What do you have here, human talk?" A new voice barked. "Dinner?" "A girl. Must be from the village. I thought she could provide us with information." "A good idea. How unlike you, Humtak." More voices laughed, sounding like rocks tumbling down a hill. How many were there? At least 3, Talon decided. She was outnumbered. "Shall we question her now?" Humtak asked, bringing Talon closer to the voices. She felt the heat of a nearby fire, smelled food roasting. Her stomach growled again, though she didn't feel any hunger. "Not until Num returns, Humtak. You know he likes to be present for every interrogation." "What do we do with her until then?" "Put her to sleep, of course." A heavy object hit Talon in the head. She felt nothing, but the force knocked her to the ground. She lay there motionless. They must have expected the blow to knock her out. If she pretended to be unconscious, perhaps she could learn something. Hopefully that one blow was not enough to put Smil out for very long. The rope tugged again, but not much. Humtak or one of the others must have tied her to something. A tree, perhaps. Talon could hear the faint calls of owls and chattering of squirrels. Were any of them Smil? For a moment a shining flash of hope brightened Talon's thoughts. The dragon could transform herself. Unless her magic was as lost as Talon's clerical powers. Talon's shoulders drooped in disappointment before she could control the reaction. "Are you sure she's out? She shouldn't overhear our plans." A hard object hit Talon in the stomach. For once the lack of pain seemed to be a good thing. She had no trouble pretending to be out cold. A sharp rock poked her in the cheek. Good. That was yet another pain that Smil might feel and realize the danger Talon was in. "She's out," grunted Humtak. "We'll wake her up when Nuat returns." "I just hope she has some useful information," one of the others said, his voice receding as they walked away. "Who would have expected one of the town whelps to be running around loose this late at night?" "The Dark Queen is giving us good fortune indeed," said the first voice. The Dark Queen? Tahisis! The evil goddess directly opposed Mishkael and had been responsible for starting the War of the Lance a few years ago. These creatures looked to Tahisis for good fortune. They could not possibly be good. Talon's brain near blind panic, and she fought to remain logical. If she was someone like Elrit, she could pretend to be sympathetic to Cahisis, but if these guys were the least bit observant, they would have noticed Talon's blue rose and medallion of Mishkael, and known immediately that she was no ally. It sounded as though there were indeed 3 of them, not counting the missing Numat. Talon prayed to Mishkael that Numat would stay away a good long while. She did not know if her prayers would be answered any more, but the habit was so deeply ingrained that she could not go without at least asking the goddess for help. "Just think of the status the treasure will bring us, Mentor," said Humtak with a slurp that sounded like eating. "Treasure? In the forest?" Talon wanted to hear more, but a new voice entered the conversation. "What is this? Where did you get that human?" "She was just wandering about the forest, no?" Humtak answered. "Silly thing. One never knows what evil beasts these might be about." The group chuckled harshly. "Quite right," Numat said. Talon heard his steps approach the fire, where the others had been eating. She concentrated on staying as still as possible. Have you discovered anything from interrogating her? Numa asked, chewing loudly. Talon tried to keep from shuddering. What was he planning for her? Nothing. We thought you would want to be here for the questioning, Humet said. I certainly do, Snoop said. He turned from the fire and walked over to Talon. Wake up, Snoop said, slapping Talon's face to his sack. She felt the force of the blow, but not the tiniest whisper of pain. There was something else about the hand that struck her, too. Devoid of pain, she found that she was able to feel more of what touched her. It had not been skin that struck her face. Gloves, perhaps? The others were untying her now. What were they going to do? One of them ripped the sack from her head, and Talon was momentarily blinded by the leaping fire, which was almost touching the trees overhanging the crude camp. There were no tents, but a stew pot simmering over the fire. From the smell, Talon didn't want to know what their dinner was. As her eyes adjusted, Talon got her first good look at her captors. They were not human, elf, or even ogre or goblin. These were forms that she had never seen before, but had heard tales of many, many times. Draconians. Talon swallowed a scream. While her nightmares were filled with real dragons, there were other creatures that walked the edges of her mind during sleep. Humans that suddenly took on the forms of dragons, twisted and perverted into creatures she hated. If she could feel pain, Talon thought, she would pinch herself and wake from this nightmare. But she was awake, being shoved to her feet by these true-life monsters. Talon didn't know which kind of draconians these were. There were as many kinds of draconians as there were good dragons, whose eggs were corrupted to make these brutes, but they all appeared to be the same color and size, whatever they were. They were easily as tall as Rogan, with large rings and bronze-tinged scales that reminded her horribly of Samil. All four were dressed in dark, blood-splattered plate armor. In their clawed hands each of them held a weapon, but the weapons were not what frightened Talon the most. After all, none of them could make her feel the least bit of pain. No, the alarm that shot through her at seeing the Draconians, who were now dragging her to the fire, was from a cause even more dire. How would she know if her arm got broken, or if she got a deadly wound? That complication had not occurred to her before. Completely devoid of any emotion save malice, the Draconians ringed Talon as if they were evil fireflies. Nope stepped forward, raising his weapon. Tongs. Although Talon kept telling herself that she felt no pain, she could not control the sinking feeling in her stomach. What was he going to do to her? The tongs came nearer and nearer to Talon's face. She nearly went cross-eyed, focusing on them. Numa held them a hair's breadth from her nose. They obviously wanted something from her, or she would be dead already. But what information could she possibly give? Perhaps they were going to attack Forest Edge. How long would it take them to get there from here? It would have taken her days to get to this side of the mountain, had she not taken a dragon shortcut over it. How fast could Draconians travel? All Talon could see were the red-hot tongs glowing in front of her face, singeing the air, and quite possibly her skin. It was all she could do not to scream, though she couldn't help letting a whimper escape. But after a few more moments of silent fear, Numa put the tongs back in the fire. So, little one, you fear us, he said. As well you should. However, I am somewhat of a sentimentalist. I don't like torturing young pretty girls. No, not at all, Ventura said with a chuckle. He flung the dagger into the ground a foot or so from where Talon stood. Then he retrieved it and flung it again, aiming it closer to Talon, and repeated the action again and again, coming closer and closer to her as Nook continued to talk. His toothy smile and pointy scales made him look like a human with a dragon head, and it was almost impossible for Talon to concentrate on what Nook was saying. However, Nook continued, and Talon was sure she meant something. If you are not hospitable and do not tell us about this fine land we visit and the town we seek, perhaps we might have to do some things to you that are not so pleasant. Talon's mind was raced. She could not tell him about Forest Edge. The town had just begun to repair itself. But what would the Draconians do to her? While she couldn't feel pain, she was certain that her body could only stand so much abuse before she died, especially since she could no longer heal herself. As if reading her mind, Note said, You wear the robes of a cleric of Mishkael. Curious that nothing happened to me when I did this. He reached a claw toward Talon's neck. Talon braced herself for what must surely be coming, but no shock issued forth from the necklace. Numit stood close enough to kiss, his bronze claws wrapped around the medallion, but showed no sign of pain. "I believe you are a false cleric," he declared. "I believe you don the medallion robes of a cleric, but are no such thing." Talon thought fast. "There was a play in town." The Draconian nodded. "Perhaps, perhaps not. In any case, you do not have the defenses that my men and I initially thought you had, and no one is coming to your rescue. We certainly can't let you go. You might reach your village first and raise the alarm." Talon shook her head, trying to look scared and hopeless, but at the same time her mind was putting pieces together. She was not alone in the forest. She had no idea how long she had been gone, but surely Samil was beginning to wonder. By now the dragon probably thought Talon had deserted her. Talon would have thought so if Samil had wandered off and not returned. If Samil felt pain, Talon's pain, she should be on her way in this direction. Talon knew what she needed to do. "Tell us a bit about your town," Nimit said. "How are the defenses?" "We have a garrison of Salamic knights at our beck and call," Talon said glibly. "Years ago, one of the villagers saved the life of a noble child who wandered off during a hunt, and ever since then they have defended our village with their lives." "Did you hear that, Nip?" Ventur gasped. "Knights! Maybe we should think twice about this." "Fool, she's lying," Nimit snarled. He grabbed the tongs out of the fire and clamped them around Talon's wrists. She felt pressure and intense heat, but no pain. Showing no pain was easy, but she had to pretend to endure the pain a little while longer. The sooner she cracked, the sooner the Draconians would either cease their torture or kill her. "How far is it to your village?" Nimit asked. "Only a few moments if you find the portal in the woods. That is how I came to be here." This time none of the Draconians bought her fib. Nimit nodded to Ventur, who drew back his dagger and flung it toward Talon. It buried itself into her right shoulder and began to trickle blood down her arm. "How many live in your village?" Nimit asked, releasing the tongs from her wrists and tossing them back into the fire. "It varies between 10 and 10,000. People are always coming and going. They shall welcome you, and be even more thankful when you leave." This time Nook did not even look at the other Draconians before they advanced upon her. As Talon saw the sword rise in the moonlight, she prayed for three things: that Samil would find her swiftly, that the dragon would not be in too much pain to help, and that the Draconians would not kill her before Samil could save her. That is the end of chapter 9. See ya!